Welcome to today's edition of SFG Top Performance. Today we'll do a feed and grain podcast. Bo Smith, who normally would be our lead-in person, is under the weather today, and so he's unavailable. Myself, I'm out of the office, but due to fantastic communications anymore, I'm still able to participate. Even though I'm 1,000 miles from home, you might say, and literally and figuratively both. So with me today, I've got Kent Watson and Scott Goetz, and we'll between us, we'll kind of talk about some grain and feed issues that are currently taking place. I'll start out with the grain, and since we last did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, we had a USDA WADC report on February 9th. A lot of interest leading into that report, a lot of optimism, both corn and beans. We'd had probably 3 very positive reports from the government in a row, and that's kind of unusual in itself, but we didn't quite get the 4th one on the corn side. The trade was looking for about a 1.3 billion carryout on corn in the current marketing year, and the government came in at 1.5 billion. They lowered it 50 million bushel essentially. And even though we've had a lot of great sales to China in the month leading up to that report, the government's response was those bushels haven't shipped yet. That could change, and it could. We could see some cancellations as we go forward. On the bean side, the trade was looking for about a 119 million bushel carryout. The government said 120, so really close on that. For a couple of days after the report, both corn and beans kind of took a tumble, but then they have clawed themselves back up to almost the same level we were at going into the report. So that tells me that, yeah, we've got maybe plenty of grain now, or more than we expected, especially on the corn side, but the trade's still not buying it full force at this point, and they're waiting to see what happens. And if China would take all they bought, maybe buy some more, we could still get tight. And of course, heading into spring weather here eventually, it doesn't look like it today, I know, in the Midwest, but spring will come, and that will play a role in how we get the crop planted in the coming year. So a big deal there. A more current thing, this week, the USDA Ag Forum met. They meet every year in mid-February. They're kind of the first outlook conference is what they call it. They give out some of the first official or sort of official expectations of planting intentions from farmers. And of course, we're still on the early side, but the majority of the farmers can tell you today what they intend to plant. Not that they won't, some of them change, but most of them got a pretty good idea, especially if they've put fertilizer or chemicals on some of those acres. But they came out with they expect 92 million acres of corn to be planted this spring in the United States. That would be up from 89 point something last year, so a couple million more acres. Beans, a more dramatic increase there. They're looking at 90 million acres. Versus 83 last year, so about a 7 million acre increase in beans. They also projected trendline yields. That's pretty normal, unless there's some odd reason not to this early heading into the season. But the carryouts for next year will be on corn about 1.55 billion. So again, not a huge increase over this year's. And beans, they're projecting about 145 million, which would definitely be workable and keep us in a decent price range. Speaking of prices, their estimated prices are $4.20 on corn for the coming year and $11.20 on beans. Right now, we're about a dime below that on new crop local market. On corn, beans were a nickel to a dime better than that. So we're right in the ballpark of what they anticipate. Both numbers would be profitable for most farmers. So if that's the case, you know, it might be worthy of going ahead and locking a few bushels in at this point and seeing if what spring weather brings us. South America still having weather issues. They're getting more of the beans harvested, but Brazil, the safrinha corn, the second crop corn, they've only got 25% of planted what they normally would this time of year. And so that's going to push some of those acres into a risk type mode for hot weather during pollination down there. And that in turn could be a big thing for us. You know, if they can't produce the bushels, we become the secondary market later in the season. Looking at exports to date, we've already exported or sold, I should say, sold 98% of the beans that were projected and 89% of the corn. We still got 6 months of the marketing year left. However, those are the months that South America comes in and takes a lot of this market away from us. But overall, we've had good export sales. That's what's provided the spark to keep this market in an upward trend. And as long as we don't see a lot of cancellations, I think we should hold that. Now, that brings us back to my last thing on old crop prices and where do we go from here? There's still quite a spread between old crop and new crop. Somehow that's got to come together at some point. Now, will that be in March or July or September? It's hard to truly say. Basis levels remain strong, particularly on corn in the local area, just because the derecho last year affected a wide part of the central Iowa market. And so those markets are trending into our area. Once the river opens up there in late March, early April, again, that's going to be another draw out of our particular area and would probably help basis levels again. So on the basis side, I think we're in good shape going into the summer. As far as the board, I think there's still some possibility that we may take 50 cents off this market in the next couple of months if the weather doesn't throw us more curveballs. On the beans, I think they'll continue to be tight, probably through the early summer at least, until there's a more indication of what we see as far as the new crop and the prospects of the new crop. So I'll leave the grain there at that point, and I'm going to kick it over to Kent Watson. Yeah, Kent.
I'm just curious, with all those additional bean acres that are projecting, where are those acres going to be primarily coming from?
Well, at this point, they really don't specify. I think we'll see quite a bit of increase in central Iowa due to the derecho. You know, a lot of them corn acres that got blowed over, volunteer corn will be a problem. So there could easily be 1 to 2 million acres kicked in there. Other areas would be what I call marginal areas where corn maybe is not as consistent as a yielder, but they can grow 40 to 50 bushel beans. So those are the areas I see changing possibly. So Kent, if you want to go ahead and lead us into the feed department.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of just briefly talk about something we need to be thinking about now, planning ahead, and that's putting fly control additives into our mineral or other feed products. I know that's hard to think about after the last couple of weeks we've been through, but fly season will be coming very shortly. And when you do put a feed additive out, you need to be thinking 30 days before the fly season starts to start feeding it. So, you know, we need to probably start feeding it at the end of March, 1st of April to take advantage and get ahead of this fly population. You know, flies are a constant irritant and performance drain on our cattle, whether they're on pasture or dry lot. They can be not only a constant irritant, but they also can transmit diseases So it is a large economic impact on the cattle industry. In fact, recent studies have basically estimated it's about a $4.5 billion loss. Equates to about $50 for every dairy and beef animal in the United States. So you can see it can be pretty significant. There's a multiple number of methods that you can add fly control larvicide to. The most popular is in minerals, but any type of minerals program that you want to add it to, it's available. And there's also different types of products itself. There's the IGR, which is the more popular one that basically controls horn flies only. And then there's Rabon and Clearfield, which not only controls horn flies, but face flies, stable flies, and house flies, the four major flies that impact the cattle business. So you need to sort of determine which one you might want to be using. When we think of fly control, horn flies, even though those are probably the most popular one that you look at because you see them more, those black flies on the backs or the shoulders of the animal, they really only contribute about 25% of the economic loss, total loss. Face flies and house flies, contribute about an additional 25%. But the ones that really have the biggest impact, believe it or not, is stable flies, because the method in which they use to feed on the animal, they instead of biting or piercing the animal, they actually tear the skin and flesh to get more blood flow so they can feed on it. So there's a lot more painful, and so they you'll see cattle laying down or in the up to their waist in water to help keep the flies from biting on their legs. And so obviously if they're laying down or in water, they're not feeding, or conversely calves cannot be nursing. So you can see why the extra economic impact occurs with stable flies. But another type of mineral now it's not a mineral, but additive that's being used, is getting more and more popularity, is the feeding of garlic. Last 2 years, you start seeing a lot of people using garlic. It doesn't kill the flies, but it actually repels the flies. When they eat it, it emits a sulfur substance through their skin or through their breath, and it actually repels the flies. And an added benefit, it also repels mosquitoes, ticks, and lice as well. So that's something that we're starting to see more and more interest in as well. So we're never going to totally get rid of flies, but putting it in your feed additive is a very cost-effective, important step that you can use. But we need to be looking at that now, and we need to be, talking to your SFG feed rep to decide which method is most that would be most effective and works best for your operation. So
thanks, Kent. That was some interesting information there, especially on the garlic. I hadn't heard that before. Scott, you're up there in the Milo area. What kind of update do you have for us this morning?
Well, Mark, I thought I'd talk about a couple breeder minerals. Kent's got a new performance mineral line out, and there's a couple of those in particular that I'd like to mention. First one is the Performance AD&E with Avela4. This is the old AD&E with Avela4 added. Avela4 is an amino acid trace mineral additive. It is in a highly available form and is research proven to improve reproductive performance in cattle. It also improves colostrum quality and pregnancy retention, so you can get benefit from feeding this year round. The AD&E was a real good solid mineral to begin with, and with the addition of the Avela4, I think it's a good economical choice for a breeder mineral for year-round performance for your cows. The other mineral that I wanted to discuss is the Performance Full Flush Avail4. This is a true breeder mineral. It's a step up type of a mineral. It's got, in addition to Avail4 and selenium yeast, it's a sulfide-free formula. And it also has higher rates of trace minerals and vitamins for reproductive efficiency. All this combined makes it a mineral that is highly bioavailable and very effective. This mineral is designed for producers who do AI and embryo work, but it'll also work in a pasture setting. Both of these give the full labeled grade of 7 grams of Avail4 per 4-ounce feeding of the mineral. And going back to what Kent was talking about, they are available with fly control and medication. So if you got any more questions about these, you can give us a call and we can talk about them. That's all I got, Mark.
Well, thank you, Scott. From all of us at SFG, we want to welcome anybody to stop in at any of our locations or contact us for more information on any feed products that we carry and the grain markets. We'll always be glad to talk to you or get the right person with you to discuss your needs. So with that, this ends this edition of the SFG Top Performance Podcast. Thank you for listening.